Step out. Now. Don't argue with me.
I'm complying, but tell me the lawful reason. My FBI credentials are on the passenger seat.
I don't care who you say you are. Suspicious vehicle. Hands on the hood.
Then look at the credentials before you make this a federal case, because you're about to detain the sack of the...
They took his gun. They took his freedom. They treated him like a criminal because of the color of his skin and the car he was driving. But Officer Kyle Braden and his night shift buddies had absolutely no idea that the man they were stripping of his dignity was Marcus Thorne, the special agent in charge of the FBI's Southeastern Division. They didn't know that while they were laughing at him in a cold holding cell, the entire weight of the United States Department of Justice was about to descend on their small town like a hammer. Before the sun would set, the next day 14 badges would be on the table. The city would be facing a near $10 million deficit, and a corrupt department would learn exactly what happens when you declare war on the wrong man. Before we get into this story of absolute justice, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that no badge grants the right to abuse power, hit that subscribe button right now, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Let's get into the story that changed a city forever. Marcus Thorne was not a man who panicked. Panic was a luxury for people who hadn't spent 30 years hunting domestic terrorists, dismantling organized crime syndicates, and staring down cartel lieutenants. At 56 years old, Marcus carried himself with the quiet, heavy silence of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and survived it. He was dressed in a charcoal bespoke suit, the kind that cost more than most people's first cars, though he had removed the jacket for the drive. He was behind the wheel of a black Chevrolet Tahoe government-issued up, armored, and equipped with a satellite communication array hidden under the chassis. He was passing through a small, dusty town in rural Alabama on his way back to the field office after a joint task force meeting in Mobile. It was 1:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. The sun was beating down on the asphalt, creating heat shimmers that danced on the horizon. Marcus was hungry. He pulled the Tahoe into the lot of a local diner, a place with a faded sign and a half-full parking lot. He just wanted a sandwich and coffee. He didn't know he was about to become the victim in a federal civil rights case. He parked the Tahoe perfectly between the lines, away from other cars to avoid door dings, a habit drilled into him during his rookie days at Quantico. He checked his phone. 3 missed emails from the deputy director. They could wait. As he reached for the door handle, he saw the patrol cruiser roll by. It slowed down. Marcus watched in his side mirror. The cruiser stopped. Reverse lights came on. It backed up until it was blocking Marcus's exit path. A young officer stepped out. Kyle Braden was 27 years old with a high and tight haircut that looked aggressive and a uniform that was too tight around the biceps. He walked with a swagger that Marcus recognized immediately. It was the walk of a man who thought the badge on his chest made him a god. Braden approached the Tahoe, his hand resting on his service weapon. Not drawn, but ready. Marcus sighed a deep rumble in his chest. He knew this dance. He rolled down the window. "Help you, officer?" Marcus asked, his voice a deep baritone, calm and level. "Step out of the vehicle," Braden said. No greeting, no reason. Just a command. Marcus didn't move. He kept his hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2 perfectly visible. "Is there a problem? Have I committed a traffic violation?" "I said step out of the car. I'm not going to ask you twice." Braden's voice pitched up a little. He was already agitated. "Officer," Marcus said, turning his head slowly to look Braden in the eye, "I am required to inform you that I am a federal agent. My credentials are in my jacket pocket on the passenger seat. My service weapon is secured in a lockbox in the center console. I am asking you why you are detaining me." Braden sneered. He actually sneered. "I don't care who you say you are. We've had reports of a suspicious vehicle matching this description trafficking narcotics. Now get out or I'm dragging you out." It was a lie. Marcus knew it was a lie. This was a standard government fleet vehicle. There was nothing unique about it other than the tint, which was legal for federal transport. But Marcus also knew the law. He knew Pennsylvania versus Mims. He knew that legally an officer could order a driver out of the vehicle during a lawful stop. The question was whether the stop was lawful. But arguing that on the side of the road with an agitated 27-year-old was a good way to get shot. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt. He opened the door and stepped out, rising to his full height of 6'3". He towered over Braden. The young officer took a half step back, intimidated by the sheer physical presence of the older man, but he quickly recovered his arrogance. "Turn around. Hands on the hood," Braden barked. "I am not consenting to a search," Marcus said, clearly loud enough for the couple walking into the diner to hear. "I am complying with your order to exit the vehicle, but I do not consent to a search of my person or my property without a warrant." This was the moment that changed everything. If Braden had been a good cop, he would have checked the ID, realized his mistake, and apologized. But Braden wasn't a good cop. He was a bully with state authority. He felt his control slipping. The older black man in the expensive suit wasn't trembling. He wasn't begging. He was quoting the Constitution. And that made Braden furious. He clicked his radio. "Dispatch, I have a non-compliant suspect at the diner on Main. Send backup. Step it up." "Officer," Marcus said, "I am perfectly compliant. I am standing exactly where you told me to stand. I am simply asserting my Fourth Amendment rights." "Shut up," Braden snapped. "You're under investigation for drug trafficking." "Based on what reasonable suspicion?" Marcus asked. "State your articulable facts." "Based on you fitting the description," Braden said. "And your attitude." Marcus shook his head slightly. "Attitude is not a crime, and fitting a description requires specifics you don't have. You are making a mistake that is going to cost you your career." The siren started then. Not one, but three. The wail of approaching authority echoed off the brick buildings of the small town. Marcus stood by the hood of his Tahoe, the metal hot against his fingertips. He looked at Braden. "You called for backup." "You're lucky I didn't call for the dogs," Braden spat. "You're going to wish you had," Marcus thought, "because you're going to need a lot more than dogs to fix this." The situation was escalating rapidly, and Marcus Thorne, a man who had negotiated with terrorists, prepared himself for one of the most dangerous encounters of his life, a traffic stop in the American South. The backup arrived in a screech of tires and dust. Two more cruisers slid into the lot, boxing the Tahoe in completely. Four more officers spilled out. They were a mix of ages, but they all moved with the same aggressive energy. They saw Braden standing with his hand on his gun facing a large black man, and they didn't ask questions. They just joined the pack. One of them, a sergeant named Miller, a man in his late 30s with a thick mustache, approached. "What's the situation, Braden?" Miller asked, his eyes locked on Marcus. "Suspect refused to exit the vehicle initially," Braden lied smoothly. "Claimed to be a Fed, acting belligerent. I smell marijuana coming from the car." It was such a lazy lie. Marcus hadn't smoked a day in his life, and the Tahoe smelled like leather and detailing spray. "That is a fabrication," Marcus said calmly. "Sergeant, my name is Marcus Thorne. I am the special agent in charge of the Southeastern Division. My credentials are in the vehicle. If you verify them, we can all go about our day." Sergeant Miller looked at Marcus. He saw the suit. He saw the calm demeanor. But he also saw Braden, his guy. And in this department, you backed your guy, right or wrong. The blue wall was thicker than the Constitution here. "If you're a Fed, you should know better than to give my officer a hard time," Miller said. "Asserting my rights is not giving him a hard time," Marcus replied. "It is the law. The same law you swore an oath to uphold." Miller didn't like that. He stepped into Marcus's personal space. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "Am I under arrest?" Marcus asked. "For what offense?" "Disorderly conduct and resisting an officer," Miller said. "And we'll see what else we find in the car." Marcus knew that resisting physically would be a death sentence. There were 6 of them now, hands on weapons, adrenaline spiking. He turned slowly. He placed his hands behind his back. He felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click onto his wrists. They were tight, too tight. Braden cranked them down unnecessarily hard. "Check for the key," Marcus said. "You're cutting off circulation." "Don't tell me how to do my job," Braden whispered in his ear. They patted him down roughly. Braden reached into Marcus's pocket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open. The FBI badge was right there. The gold shield, the holographic identification card, the bold letters, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Braden looked at it. He hesitated for a split second. He showed it to Miller. Miller glanced at it and shrugged. "Probably fake. You can buy these online for $20. We'll verify it at the station. Impound the car." "You do not have probable cause to search that vehicle." Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "That is a federal government vehicle containing classified material. If you enter that vehicle, you are violating the Espionage Act as well as the 4th Amendment." "Listen to the lawyer here," one of the other cops laughed. "Tow it," Miller ordered. "We'll get a warrant later. Or we'll just say we did inventory for impound." They shoved Marcus into the back of Braden's cruiser. The seat was molded plastic hard and unforgiving. His shoulders screamed in protest from the angle of his arms. He watched through the window as a tow truck backed up to his Tahoe. He watched them high-five each other. They thought they had caught a big fish. A drug dealer posing as a Fed. They were congratulating themselves on a bust. Marcus closed his eyes and began to breathe rhythmically. He needed to lower his heart rate. He needed to remember every detail, every face, every name tag, every timestamp. He wasn't a prisoner. He was an investigator behind enemy lines. And he was gathering evidence. The ride to the station took 15 minutes. Braden drove fast, braking hard at stop signs to toss Marcus around in the back seat. It was petty. It was childish. And it was all being recorded on the partition camera, though Braden probably thought he could delete that later. "You comfortable back there, Agent?" Braden mocked. Marcus didn't answer. He was done talking to the help. He was waiting for the management. When they arrived at the precinct, they dragged him out. They paraded him through the bullpen. Other officers looked up. Some smirked. Some ignored it. It was a culture of complicity. They brought him to the booking desk. The booking officer, a woman named Officer Holloway, looked bored. "Name?" she asked, not looking up. "Marcus Elias Thorne," he said. "Date of birth?" He gave it. "Occupation?" "Special Agent in Charge, Federal Bureau of Investigation." She paused. She looked up. She looked at Braden. "He thinks he's J. Edgar Hoover." Braden laughed. "Put down unemployed." "Do not falsify the record," Marcus said sharply. "I have identified myself. My credentials are in Officer Braden's possession." Braden tossed the wallet onto the counter. "Fake ID. Log it as evidence." Holloway held the wallet. She felt the weight of the badge. She looked at the ID card. She had processed fakes before. They felt like plastic. This felt real. She looked at Marcus again. The suit was destroyed, wrinkled, and dusty, but the fabric was high quality. The shoes were Italian leather. This didn't look like a street criminal. A seed of doubt planted itself in her mind, but she stayed silent. She was 10 years from retirement. She wasn't going to rock the boat against the night shift boys. "Strip search," Miller ordered from the doorway. "On what grounds?" Marcus demanded. "This is a traffic stop arrest. You have no suspicion of weapons or contraband on my person." "Department policy for narcotics, suspects," Miller lied. They took him to a small room. They made him remove the suit, the silk tie, the dress shirt. They humiliated him. It was designed to break him, to show him that he was nothing and they were everything. Marcus complied with stone-cold dignity. He didn't cover himself in shame. He stood tall, looking them in the eye the entire time. When it was over, they gave him an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too small. They took his shoes. They walked him barefoot to a holding cell and shoved him inside. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in his bones. "Phone call," Marcus said through the bars. "Phones are down." Braden smiled. "Maintenance. Try again in the morning." It was another lie. A violation of due process. Marcus sat on the steel bench. The cell was freezing. The air conditioner was cranked up, a common tactic to make inmates uncomfortable so they wouldn't sleep, so they would be pliable for interrogation. Marcus folded his arms for warmth. He stared at the concrete wall. He began to plan. He wasn't just going to sue them. He was going to dismantle them. He checked his mental watch. He had missed his check-in. His team would be looking for him. The night passed in agonizing slowness. Officers came by to bang on the bars to make noise to keep him awake. They brought him a sandwich that looked inedible. He refused it. He didn't drink the water. He sat in a meditative state reviewing the statutes they had violated. Title 18, United States Code Section 242. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Kidnapping. False imprisonment. Conspiracy. The list was growing by the hour. By 3 a.m. the station quieted down. Marcus leaned his head against the cold cinder block. He thought about his wife, Sarah. She would be worried sick. She knew he never missed a call. She would have called the deputy director by now. The wheels were turning. He just had to wait for the sunrise. 400 miles away in Washington, D.C., the sun was not yet up, but the lights were blazing on the 7th floor of the J. Edgar Hoover building. The assistant director of the FBI was standing over a bank of monitors. "Where is he?" he barked. "We lost contact at 1300 hours yesterday," a tech analyst said, typing furiously. "His phone is dead, but the transponder in the Tahoe is active. Located. Signal is stationary. It's in a police impound lot in... Wait." The analyst zoomed in on the map. "It's in Oak Haven, Alabama." "Police impound." The assistant director frowned. "Was there an accident?" "No reports of an accident, sir. No hospital admissions matching his description. But I'm pulling the local ALPR data. His vehicle was scanned by a patrol unit at 12:55 p.m. "Call the field office in Birmingham," the assistant director ordered. "Tell them SAC Thorne is missing and his vehicle is in police custody. I want a task force rolling in 10 minutes. And get HRT on standby. If they have him and he hasn't called..." The implication hung in the air. If a special agent in charge was being held and hadn't been allowed to communicate, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a hostile act. "Sir," the analyst said, "I'm accessing the cloud backup from his vehicle's dashcam. It uploaded before the engine was cut." They watched the footage in silence. They saw the stop. They heard the lies. They saw the arrest. The assistant director's face went purple. "That's a kidnapping. They just kidnapped a federal officer." He turned to his aide. "Get me the Attorney General, and tell Birmingham to bring the hammer." Back in Oak Haven, the morning shift was coming on. Chief Harold Baker was pouring his first cup of coffee. He was a man who liked a quiet town. He didn't like problems. He saw the arrest report on his desk. Narcotics trafficking, resisting arrest, John Doe. He frowned. John Doe. He didn't have ID. Sergeant Miller, who had stayed late to finish the paperwork, shrugged. "Claimed to be FBI. Presented a fake badge. We booked him as John Doe until we can get prints." "FBI." The chief paused, mug halfway to his mouth. "You checked it." "It looked fake, Chief. Guy was arrogant. Typical dealer attitude." The chief felt a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. "Where's the badge now?" "Evidence locker." "Go get it." "Chief, it's just a..." "Go get it," Baker snapped. Miller shuffled off. 10 minutes later, he returned with the wallet. Chief Baker put on his reading glasses. He opened the wallet. He took out the credentials. He held them up to the light. He saw the microprinting. He felt the texture of the seal. He had seen fake IDs before. He had also worked a joint task force with the feds in the 90s. His blood ran cold. This was real. "You idiot," Baker whispered. "You absolute moron." "What?" Miller asked. "This is real? You arrested a special agent in charge. Do you know what that means? That's like arresting a general?" "No way," Miller stammered. He didn't look like—" "Shut up," Baker roared. "Get him out here. Now unprocess him. Delete the booking photo. Get him coffee. Pray to God he hasn't—" The sound of helicopters cut him off, not the gentle whir of a traffic chopper, the heavy thumping beat of military-grade rotors. Chief Baker ran to the window. 2 Black Hawk helicopters were hovering low over the town square. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the street. A convoy of 12 black Chevrolet Suburbans was tearing down Main Street. They weren't stopping for lights. They were moving in a tactical column. They screeched to a halt in front of the station, blocking every exit. Doors flew open. Men in heavy body armor poured out. They carried automatic rifles. On their backs, in bright yellow letters, were 3 letters that spelled the end of Chief Baker's career, FBI. "Lock down the building," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Federal agents, drop your weapons and step outside." Inside the station, panic erupted. The receptionist screamed. Officers scrambled. Chief Baker walked to the front door, his hands raised. He pushed it open. He was met by a dozen laser sights pointed at his chest. A woman in a tactical vest stepped forward. She was the assistant special agent in charge from Birmingham. Her face was a mask of fury. "I am Chief Baker," he stammered. "There must be a Where is he?" She cut him off. Her voice was like a whip. He's in holding. We were just—" "Secure the building," she yelled to her team. "Disarm every officer inside. If anyone reaches for a radio, put them on the ground." The lobby was flooded with agents. Local cops were pushed against walls, their weapons stripped from their holsters. It was a hostile takeover. The power dynamic had shifted so violently that the air seemed to crackle. The team moved to the holding cells. They found the keys. They opened the steel door. Marcus Thorne was sitting on the bench, still in the orange jumpsuit. He looked up. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "Took you long enough," he said. "Traffic was murder, boss," the lead agent said, handing Marcus his clothes. "You okay?" "I'm fine." Marcus stood up, stretching his stiff back. "I want names. I want the logbooks. I want the hard drives from the server room. And I want the Bodycam footage from every officer who was on shift last night." "We're already pulling it." Marcus dressed slowly. He put on his wrinkled shirt, his trousers. He tied his tie. He put on his jacket. He didn't put his shoes on yet. He walked out to the lobby in his socks, carrying his shoes. The scene in the lobby was something out of a movie. 14 officers, including Braden and Miller, were lined up against the wall, zip-tied. The FBI agents had taken total control. Chief Baker was standing in the middle of the room, sweating profusely. Marcus sat down on a bench and put his shoes on. He tied the laces methodically. Then he stood up and walked over to Chief Baker. "Chief," Marcus said. "Agent Thorne." Baker swallowed. I had no idea. My officers, they made a mistake. A terrible mistake. We can fix this." "This wasn't a mistake," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "A mistake is a typo. A mistake is a wrong turn. This was a conspiracy to deprive a citizen of their civil rights. This was kidnapping. This was assault. And it wasn't just me. You don't get this comfortable violating rights overnight. You've been doing this for a long time." Marcus turned to look at Braden. The young cop was pale, trembling. He wasn't sneering anymore. "Officer Braden," Marcus said, "you asked me for my reasonable suspicion. Here it is. I suspect you are unfit to wear that uniform. And I'm going to prove it." The investigation was immediate and brutal. The FBI didn't hand it over to Internal Affairs. They handled it themselves. They treated the police station like a crime scene. They seized the servers. They downloaded years of dashcam footage. They reviewed the arrest records. What they found was a factory of corruption. Officer Braden had a history of stopping minority drivers. In the last year alone, 85% of his stops were Black or Latino drivers. He had turned off his Bodycam 17 times during arrests. Sergeant Miller had signed off on reports that directly contradicted video evidence in over 40 cases. The night shift had a group chat on their personal phones where they bragged about rough rides and teaching lessons. It wasn't just a bad apple. The tree was rotten. By 5 p.m. that evening, the United States Attorney arrived. She convened an emergency grand jury. Marcus sat in an office giving his statement. He detailed every word, every violation. "They denied me counsel," he said. "They denied me a phone call. They stripped me. They mocked me. If they do this to a special agent in charge, imagine what they do to a 19-year-old kid who works at the grocery store." That was the crux of it. Marcus wasn't angry for himself. He was angry for the people who didn't have a task force coming to save them. The fallout was nuclear. The next morning, the headlines screamed Alabama Police Department raided by FBI. 14 officers were fired on the spot. But firing was just the start. Kyle Braden was charged with deprivation of rights under color of law, kidnapping, and filing false official statements. Sergeant Miller was charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Chief Baker was forced to resign in disgrace and faced charges of negligence and failure to supervise. The remaining officers who had stood by and watched the good cops who did nothing were charged as accessories. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division took over the department. A federal monitor was installed. Every stop, every search, every ticket would now be reviewed by Washington. The lawsuit came 3 days later. It was filed not just by Marcus, but by the ACLU on behalf of a class of citizens who had been terrorized by the Oak Haven Police Department. The city council met in an emergency session. Their lawyer was blunt. "We have no defense," he told them. "We have a federal agent on video being kidnapped by our staff. We have clear evidence of racial profiling. If this goes to a jury, they will bankrupt the entire county. We need to settle." "How much?" the mayor asked, head in his hands. "Whatever they ask for." The negotiation was short. Marcus didn't want the money for himself. He wanted it to hurt. He wanted the number to be so high that every police department in America would look at it and tremble. The final settlement was $9.7 million. It was the largest settlement for a single incident of police misconduct in the state's history. The city had to raise taxes. They had to cut other budgets. The citizens of Oak Haven were furious not at Marcus, but at the police department that had cost them their future. 6 months later, Marcus Thorne stood on the steps of the federal courthouse. He watched as Kyle Braden, now wearing an orange jumpsuit of his own, was led away in handcuffs to begin a 10-year federal prison sentence. Sergeant Miller got 7 years. The reporter asked Marcus, "Agent Thorne, do you feel like justice was served?" Marcus looked at the camera. He didn't smile. "Justice," he said, "would be not having to be afraid of the people who are paid to protect you. Justice would be Kyle Braden treating a grocery store clerk with the same respect he would treat a judge. Today wasn't justice. Today was accountability. And there is a difference." Marcus took the check for his portion of the settlement. He didn't buy a new car. He didn't go on vacation. He started a legal defense fund for victims of police misconduct in rural Alabama. He hired lawyers to defend the people who didn't have badges. He went back to work the next Monday. He put on his suit. He got into his Tahoe, and he continued to serve his country. But in police academies across the nation, the video of his arrest became mandatory viewing. It was titled, "The Thorne Incident: Why Bias Will Destroy You." Instructors would play the tape. They would pause it on Braden's sneering face. "Look at him," they would say. "He thinks he's powerful. He thinks he's untouchable." 10 hours later, he was in a cell. Treat every citizen as if they are the most powerful person in the world, because one day they might be. This story matters because it exposes a terrifying reality. Marcus Thorne had the power of the federal government behind him. He had the knowledge, the rank, and the connections. And yet, for 12 hours, he was just another black man in a cage, subject to the whims of a corrupt system. It makes you wonder how many Marcus Thornes are sitting in cells right now who aren't FBI agents. How many lives have been ruined by a Kyle Braden who never got caught? Marcus Thorne won his war, but the battle for fair policing continues every single day on the streets of America. What do you think? Was $9.7 million enough? Should the officers have gotten longer sentences? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. And if this story fired you up, if you believe in holding the line against corruption, please like this video and share it. It helps us tell more stories like this. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay informed, and always know your rights. See you in the next one.